Welcome back to Daf and Hand, Mesechus Zevachim Daf Dalit. Yotzim Ufnecha Hashem Elokei V'Lokei V'Sei Hashem grant us to learn and understand today's Daf. Ki Hashem Yitn Chachmi Piv Daf Shasvinim. Today's Daf is dedicated to Lili Nishmas, my grandmother, Bracha Bas Tzipora, made Tzvi and Aliyah to her Neshama. In previous episodes, the previous Daf, we started off with Sechta. We already discussed that the Korban has to bring us the beginning, the focus of the beginning of this Sechta, the proper intentions of the proper korban, not to have a change of name and not to have a change of owner, such as if it's a korban chatas, you cannot bring it as an oila or a shlomim as a toid with various consequences, and you have to make sure you have the right owner. We discussed if you, instead of being the wrong intention, you have spaced out intentions, and we discussed that. We also had what I call mechanics of disruption, that if something is irrelevant, its existence is kind of irrelevant. We use the expression of the minei machav, loy minei loy machav. If it's not relevant, it doesn't have any effect on it. Okay, today what we're going to discuss is the source for Shinei Kodesh, if you have the wrong kind of korban, or if you have the wrong kind of owner, then why is it no good? Before we start, let me give you a quick intro. There are four main avodas, four main services to a korban, which are shechita shechting it, kabbalah accepting the blood in a cup or in some sort of vessel, walking it over to the mizbeach called halacha, and then zrika spritzing it on the mizbeach. If any of these are not done, then the korban is not good. The rest are procedural, and they don't affect the korban. Can still be kosher if we didn't do some, for example, putting the animal on the dead parts on the mizbeach afterwards. One more thing I want to say: the word nirtza, which is going to come up, something similar in the seder, the last one in the seder of the kaddish or chatz is nirtza, meaning that what we did, we asked it should be found pleasing the eyes of Hashem. So too now when you say the korban is ritzoy or not, it means it was done properly and achieved its cause, or not, and is not nirtzah. Okay, let's get underway. Beginning of the daf, as we said, we're going to discuss the first. We're starting is shini shame. If it's how do we know if it's the wrong korban? We know on the beina zvich lishma. Right at the top of the page, daf dalet, straight off the top. How do we know that we need to have a zvicha for the korban? The Omer Krah, for the proper intention. It says, the pasuk says in Vayikra, then Zevach Shlomim Korbanon. Clearly, Zevach, the shechting of the Shlomim. Zvicha l'shem Shlomim. That's quite straightforward. The Gemara asks, no, maybe it's called the Zevach Shlomim. How do you know it means it should be shechted for a Shlomim? It's called the Zevach Shlomim. Midich seva makar is dama Shlomim, or Hazoyer is dama Shlomim. Like I said, Zevach there does not use the word Zevach. It's not part of its name. Oh, yes, Kasiv Zevach, Shemami, know that it's not part of the name, just teaching us, Shtei Zvicha L'Shem Shlomim. Good. Ashkechen Zvicha, so now we have properly sourced that Zvicha has to be L'Shem. You have to, if it's whatever the korban is, you have to have it for the appropriate korban. Shar avodas Milan. What about the other avodas? How do you know they too need to be the proper intentions? V'chitem leil v'zvicha. Why not learn it out of Zvicha? If the Torah starts off that there's zvicha de shechtim, which is the beginning of all the avodas, all the how do you say avodah, all the tasks which need to be done by a korban, which is why actually we start our kol Zevachim and all the shechting. Mal zvicha and so if zvicha has to be the same korban, so learn out all the subsequent avodas also should be the same for the korban. Sounds logical. You're right, but no. Malazvicha, shkenifsula shloy l'shem oichel b'pesach. Shen paiselis is the proper way to read it. L'shem oichel b'pesach, because on korban pesach has a unique thing that when it's brought, it has to be brought. You have to have like people coming for the seder, kind of. You have to enlist and know you're going to be a part of this korban pesach. If a korban pesach is shechted without the proper people, or let's say shechted for some very old person who will physically not be able to eat from the korban pesach, then the korban pesach itself is invalidated. So that is a very high bar, and that's why zvicha is so important, that has to be the proper intentions. But maybe other ones not. So we can learn it from the other ones, from the other avoidance from Zvicha. So where do we learn it? The Omer Kratz is a makriv is dama shlomim, shtei kabbalah l'shem shlomim. We know how makriv is, the way the pasuk is, it's the makriv is the kabbalah, and that should be for shlomim. Basic most is good. So if you have a pasuk teach me that makriv, that the kabbalah, receiving of the blood, has to be the shem shlomim, then why don't you simply use that as the leader and teach everything else? The Torah wouldn't have to teach us extra by shchita. The Torah is very precise in counting in its word and is very, very intentional. So just tell me by Kabbalah, I won't need to learn shchita from it. Why do we need to have shchita separate and Kabbalah separate? Kabbalah cannot be done with a non-kohen and the isha, which is probably deleted because an isha is unique, that the wife of a kohen, even though she may not do the avodah in the base of Mikdash, but she's not chayiv korah, she's in a higher level than a non-kohen altogether. Let's leave the word isha out. But Kabbalah is possible, but if a Zor does the Kabbalah, it's possible. And if the Zor does the Shechita, it's kosher. So you can't learn Shechita from Kabbalah. Good. So Ashkan Shechita with Kabbalah. So far, we've learned Shechita, we've learned Kabbalah. That needs to be with the proper designation. Zerikim Nolan, how do you know need to sprinkle on the Mizbeach? That too needs to be with the proper intentions. And we can with Mahana. Great. We have Shechita, we have Kabbalah. Let's learn Zrika from Shechita and Kabbalah. That would not be so. That wouldn't work. Why? Malahan, Shchita and Kabbalah, Kenta'in is tough, and occasionally Shchita has to be tough in the north side. There are certain korbanos which are higher level, Kadoshim, they are designated to be shechted in the northern part of the Azor of the courtyard. And lower level korbanos can be shechted anywhere in the courtyard. So some Shchitas, some korbanos have to be shechted particularly in the north side. And some of them, some shechtings end up sprinkled inside the temple, inside the Mishkan, the base of Mikdash. But however, Zerika shecht is spritzing on the outside of Mizbeach, never ends up in the inside and never is done in the tzofan. So you can't learn it from Shchit and Kabbalah. How do you know Zerika? Tell you how. Al Omer Kras Zerg is Damish Shlomin. It says, Pasuk says clearly those words, Zerg Damish Shlomin. Zerika Shem Shlomin. Good. Now, if you have such a clear pasuk, verse in the Torah telling us Zrika is for Shlom, Zrika has to be with appropriate intentions, then just write that and learn everything else from that. And learn from that. No. You cannot learn from Zrika. Why? You know why Zrika is so unique and so holy, so to say, that needs to be, we could have said this, there needs to be with proper intention, because that is the only, that is a service that Zor is not claiming b'chai misa. So therefore, you cannot learn Shchita and Kabbalah from Zrika. So Ashke and Kula. So we have, therefore, okay, we learned Shchita, we've learned Kabbalah, we've learned Zrika, we're still missing Halacha. Halacha we know, and how do we know that walking the blood over from the place of the Shchita to the Mizbeach to sprinkle it, to sprit, how do we know that also needs to be with the proper designation? Learn from the other avoiders. Learn it from Shchita, Zvika, and Kabbalah. No. The other ones are very unique. You can't have a korban without shechting or sprinkling or accepting the blood. But guess what? You could have a korban without walking the blood over from the place of the Shchita to the Mizbeach. You know how so? If I'm going to shecht right next to the Mizbeach, I won't have to walk it over. Altogether. So therefore, I can't learn it from the other three. How do I know it? I'll tell you the source, that even halacha also has to be with the proper intentions. Omer Krov, the hikriv is a kolam Mizbecha. Omer Mar, that is Evar Mar, that zi halachas Evoram Nekevish. It means, because it's written in the end, in the pasuk, the placement of these words is at the end of the service of the whole korban, and therefore and therefore we learn that the hikra over here means putting the ivorim on the kevesh, putting the limbs on the mizbeach, on the ramp. The Tanya, the krivi is the kabbalah sadam. The krivi also means kabbalah sadam, except the word of krivi means accepting the blood in the vessel. And the reason why the Torah used the expression of halacha over here, remember to teach you the halacha letafim called kabbalah. Halacha walking it over is not out of the generality of accepting, and therefore, just as a kabbalah accepting the blood in the vessel has to be the shame of a korban, of its proper korban, walking it over, which Torah specifically used a similar phrase structure to teach us that halacha also has to be done with the proper intentions. And now we have properly sourced all four. We've sourced the all four avoidance of the korban. There has to be the shame for the owner. The shame of the proper korban. Now we're going to go to the shame of the name of the owner. So we're holding a little bit more than halfway down the page. So we've learned that Shini Kodesh has to be with the proper attention. Shini Bailamino, and how do we know that it has to be for the proper owner also? Pinchas Braid of Amma Kra, what it says, Uvisar Zevach Kodesh Shlamov, from that pasuk, the word stays Zvichelish and Toide, clearly, Zevach Kodesh Shlamov. Now, it's apparently teaching us the same thing again. But we don't need to, that has to be a proper designation, proper korban. Well, we don't need that. In the Shini Kodesh, we don't need it to teach me again Shini Kodesh. The Nafkilah Hasan, we already learned this previous, as we just learned now. All avoidance have to be for the proper word, for a proper korban. To know in the Shini Bailam and use it not to have, you're not allowed changing the owner. Now this is a concept. Because we know the Torah was written precisely and specifically and measured, nothing is there just by chance or just like leftovers. If the Torah is going to redo and teach us something again, we have a general principle. The way we learn the Torah is it's not meant to be repeated unnecessarily. It's come to teach you a new and similar law. It's called Me'eni Inyan. So it's not meant to be for Shini Kodesh, it's meant to teach me Shini Bailam that has to be shechted properly for the right owner. Well, more says, what are you talking about? Are you telling me is to teach me the shechita? I need it clearly for the following. It says, what do we learn from that? It teaches you if I took a specific kind of a korban, and I shechted for the general category of shlamim, then it's kosher. But shlamim, the general category of shlamim, and shechted specifically with Shem Toide, it's possible. My hefesh ben zelas, and what is the difference? The Toide kriya shlamim, the Toide is called shlamim, and the shlamim is not called Toide. You know, they make a joke that al chazonim, okay, I'm not going to go there, but we have is similar, like it's a kind of a Venn diagram, a two-circle Venn diagram with a subset. That the smaller one is part of the greater one. We have an example by making a bracha. If you take an apple, we know we have a boy pri eitz coming from a tree. We have boy pri dama coming from the ground. If I take an apple, which is boy pri eitz, and I make the bracha boy pri dama coming out of the ground, it's kosher because an apple comes out of the ground. If I take a cucumber and I make boy pri eitz, then the bracha does not register, does not work, because a cucumber doesn't come off a tree. Same thing over here. If I take a toid and I designate for a shlamim, that's good, because every toid is a shlamim. If I take a shlamim and designate it for toid, then it's no good. And that's what we learn from this passage. Toid is never toid is shlamim. So don't tell me it teaches us that shechit has to be proper. It teaches us something else. So therefore, more answers. And none is Zevach Karmini. There are two parts of this pasuk. There's the part of Toides, the part of Toides Shlomo, and before where we learned what we said, like kind of the Venn diagram, and then we also learned Zevach. Zevach is teaching you how to be properly shechted. We're still not satisfied. I still need the Zevach to teach me something else. Teaches me Chatav v'Osham. In this pasuk, we look at it clearly. The pasuk says, V'sar Zevach by Vav in Gemara on the side. V'sar Zevach Toidish Lama B'yom Kabon Yochel Lo Yinich V'meni Advar. You're not leaving over from the carbon until the morning. Various carbons at different designated times of when we're allowed to eat it. The holier the carbon is the holy carbons are only allowed to be eaten the day it is shechted and for the entire following evening. This pasuk teaches us don't leave it until the morning. Carbon paste. Similar. Now, how so this pasuk is talking about shlomim. How do we know it's talking about this pasuk? How do we know talking about chatas and asham also? So we have the zebach to continue to include more korbanos. So now, Toidish Lama, we learned out that the set and subset. From Zebach, we learned out that the chatas and asham are also included in the time limit of eating the korban. So how can you learn shchita? Imkein nefter chmonakra, ivasar Toidish Lama, and then Zebach. That the word Zebach alone at the end of the pasuk, closer to the words of don't leave until the morning, would be teaching me properly that the time limits of a chatas and a toida. My zevach, why is zevach placed earlier? From the placement of zevach next to shlomim, we learn that we learn the set and subset. Not just did we learn that you have to have the chatas and ashram are also 1 day limit, but zevach teacher has to be shechted properly also. Good. Shema Minotar to learn both of them. Plus the toida shlomim. So now we properly sort Zvicha. Shar avoidis we know. How do we know other avoidis also have to be done properly? Let's learn from the shechting. No, as we said earlier. Zvicha is particular because it has the restriction that if you're not going to shecht it for the proper owners, it's going to become costly. See how holy and special shechting is. That's what has to be done for the proper korban. But maybe other avoiders are in a lower class, and we won't care so much if it's shechted for the wrong person. So nemas zvicha b'shini kodesh, nemas zvicha b'shini bailim. We have zvicha by shini kodesh, and we have zvicha b'shini bailim. My zvicha omir b'shini kodesh, just as zvicha was said by shini kodesh. Maybe let's learn it this way. Just as by changing the designation, we learned shech and we sourced that all changing of designation is no good. So you see that all follows a pattern. So let's do the pattern also when we've learned that changing the owner's designation and once we learned the shchita, follow the pattern and say all of them are no good anymore. Why can't we learn it that way? Gemara says, no, I can't do that. I can't learn changing designation of the owner from changing designation of the korban. Why not? Because the designation of the changing designation of the korban, of the kind of korban is the name is different in changing the designation of the owner in 4 ways. It's inherent. If I'm changing the name of the korban, I'm changing it's inherently no good, as opposed to shini baalim, if I change the owner, that's not inherent in the animal itself. And yeshna barba avoidus, changing the designation of the name is relevant to all 4 avoidus. It's a fail. But however, by changing the name of the owner, that's only a fail. We can learn a different part of the Gemara. That's only a fail by the Shpritzi. And Yeshan Lachamisa, I can change the designation of the name after the owner died, and I'm bringing it afterwards, so the owner is no longer in the picture. I have one kind of a korban. I might change the name, but I can't change the different owner. The owner's out of the picture already; he's dead, so that won't work either. And changing the designation of the label is whether I have a public korban or a private korban. But when I cannot be changing the name by public korban because the name of the owner, everybody owns it. So I can't take it away from one person and give it to another person when the standard public korbanos are owned by everybody. Therefore, I have 4 reasons why changing the name of the owner is less than changing the name of the korban itself. However, Gemara comes to tell me, two of the previous in the previous question are not really particular, are not actual, right? Two are good, two are no good. Which are the no good ones? Why did you say shinibayim is specific to changing the label? Do I have a place like a gufoy because the changing the owner is not an inherent puzzle in the body of the carbon. It's only machshava ba'alma. How did I change the name from Ruven to Shimon? It changed something in my mind. Shina is not machshava ba'almi. How did I change the designation? Didn't do anything to the carbon. I changed something in my mind. I mislabeled it in my mind. So just as so they are similar. I can mislabel my mind the owner. I can mislabel my mind the designation. So don't use that as a difference. Given the actual apostle, I thought about it. I passed it. Given the actual apostle, I thought about it. I passed it also. So that's not a valid difference to say that they're so different. Rav Pinchas Berei the Mari, who says yes, that I could have a change of owner even after the owner died. If the owner died, and the son is bringing the carbon in the owner's name, and then the coin thinks instead of this owner, he thinks of somebody else's name, he could pass it. So therefore, again, there's not such a major difference between changing the designation of the carbon and the designation of the owner. But Tartami Ika, we're left with two major differences, which was that a public one can never change the name of the owner, and the changing the designation of the owner is not by all four avoiders, only by the spritzing. So therefore, you cannot learn from changing the label of the carbon to changing the owner of the carbon. I mean, right? So Ella Omer of Ashi, I'll tell you how. Omer Kravanir Tzloy Lechaper Olav, on him, Loyal Chaveroy. That's clear. To be the spritzing should be done for him, not for his friend. Hi, Leke, he does. He does it. 1 minute. You're trying to tell me when Nitzvah Lechaper Olav is to teach me that has to be specifically for the proper owner. I'm going to bring you a brisa that's going to show you I use this for something else. What is that? What you brought and took on your shoulders, you're obligated. What does that mean? That if I say I'm going to bring a carbon to the base of Mikdash, then the animal I was thinking of dies, and I bring another animal. But if I said I'm going to bring this specific ox to the base of Mikdash for a carbon, and then this specific ox dies, my obligation is done. So let's read it inside. Omer Yitzchak Bar my time given to Omer a lie when I said on me, commanded to the cast like carrying on my shoulders. So therefore, that's what the Nirshal Chapa comes to teach me, and not what you try to say it's coming on the speaker. No, Allah on him teaches me what I said. The concept, difference whether it's specific or on me or on this ox. But the near to loyle chaper has to be for him to chaper. That means it needs the proper owner, and therefore that teaches us zrika. Good. So now we're holding by the two dots. Ashkechem zrika v'zrika. I've learned that zvicha, shechting, and spritzing needs to be for the proper owner. Kabbalah Minayin, how we know accepting the blood in the vessel has to be for the proper owner, have to have intention to the proper owner. Very good. We already learned zvicha and zvika. Learn Kabbalah from zvicha and zvika. No, mala zvicha is zvika. Shken avoid the shuvin or bechitz. Zvika, shechting, and zvika. If I do it outside, the person's chayiv chorus. But if I do Kabbalah, the one who's receiving the blood and a korban which is shechted outside of those shouldn't have been, is not chayiv chorus. So therefore, you can't learn Kabbalah from Zvich, which is a lower level, from Zvich and Zvich, which is a higher level. How do you know? Elo, Ravashi is going to kind of like wrap it up. Asima Ayil Nazir is going to learn all of them from the pasuk of the ram of a Nazir. The Chsivus of Ayil Yas Zevachim. The Nazir. Nazir is interesting. Not just is a Nazir not supposed to drink wine and not shave, cut his hair, but at the end of this designated time, he comes to the base of Mikdash. He brings 3 different animals with 3 different karbonis and has a whole procedure. He cuts his hair and the procedure done to him, and And he brings one of the animals he brings is a ram shlomim. So it says va'al yas zevachim shtes yas b'shem shlomim gotta be b'shem shlomim. And remain in the Shini Kodesh, we already learned the Nafle Mahasam for all these psukim as we start off today's shir. In the Shini Bailim, use it for Shini Bailim. That Shini Bailim has to be particularly done for the Shlomim. Good, excellent. So now we've learned that all the avoidance has to be done for the proper owner, and changing it will make it possible. 1 second. Plus, if you brought me Yas, it says with Ayl Yas Zevachim. So we say by davening Rabbi Shmuel we quickly run through the say Kaddish, and we should really we have 13 things in there, which is how we learn to delve and extrapolate and figure things out from the Chumash. We should know all these by heart and how they all work. Sure, we all do. But we bring it says over here, is klal. You should do it. It's a generalization. Zevach is a prat, is particular, is a limitation, as opposed to a generalization. Klali prat, and we say ein beklal elamashu beprat. That's how it works. Zevicha and midachun eloi. It says al yas zevach shlomim. Maybe it means to limit. Only that it's not just increasing; it's actually limiting. So this klali prat is limiting that only shechita has to be the shem bailim and nothing else. It's doing the contrary job. It's actually limiting that only shechita. Lord, I won't accept that. Because of yasa shlomim zevach, I should make the shlomim zevach. That would be the proper word. So yasa shlomim is the full in generalization, followed by the particulars of zevach. I kind of ruined my generalization. How? Because you should do shlomim, but do and then particularly shchita and then back to shlomim kind of like messes it up. It's an unfulfilled klal. This is not a general. This is not a way klal works. So sorry, nice try, but it's not going to work over here. And we're back to our pasuk, which said it's ayil yasas shlomim, and we learned everything from here. We know maybe even better terrorists. Loilam done reduced. We even the klalipat would work, but this is even more than a klalipat. This is a klalipat klal. The Hashem chazra kol, and the klalipat klal is what we learn is that everything is like the particular. If you have a generalization and a particular and a generalization, we use the generalization as a general, the particular as a general guide, not as a limiting guide. And we'll get to it. However, let's say that the first generalization is not like the second generalization, where it says Yase and then Lashem. Klolakam and Marbesias teaches me all kinds of siyas. The siloin, those which are the four avoiders particularly needed for the carbon. Anything done for Hashem, not just for the particular, for the necessitation of the carbon to be kosher, even more avoiders, such as putting the limbs on the mizbeach or pouring out the remnants of the blood at the base of the mizbeach, which is also a particular avoid, although it wasn't a fatal flaw, but it needed to be done. So therefore, the two generalizations are not similar. Pouring out the remnants of the blood, but at the base of the mizbeach. Torah Semorim also. So our Tanur Beri B'Shmol, which is what to say every morning in Shabbos. The Klali Prati Dorish, the high government. And you learn like this: Klali Prati Klal, Iyatadon Elkein Prat. Everything similar to the particular. Maya Prat, just as the particular Mefurish Avoide is an Avoide Ubin Shman, has to be the Shman. I've called Avoide Ubin Shman, all Avoide Ubin Shman has, and therefore we've learned it. Klali Prati Klal. More says 1 second. Imaya Prat Mefurish Avoide V'Chiyobin Lo B'Chitz. Maybe no. Prat is it teaches me as to avoid those avoiders, which is Chayom Lechitz. If I would check, make it outside base of English, as we learned earlier, would be Chayiv. I call avoid Chayom Lo B'Chitz, which includes Shchita Zvika and Kabbalah by Lochaloi. Maybe it's excluding Kabbalah and Halacha. Inam, or another way to learn it. Maya Prat Mefurish Dobra Toyin Tzofan. it maybe means only those which need tough one to be shechted in the north. Yeshnim chatz fingers, and it goes occasionally on the inside. I've called only a toin tough yeshnim chatz fingers. So and therefore shechita Kabbalah and needs to be the shema. And Zvika Lloyd does not be the shema. So verses 1 second. So now you're saying maybe means this, maybe means that. You know what? You're both right. And therefore, this in this particular kind of a limud, we're saying we have a generalization and a particular and generalization. And if we can say particular means this, particular means that, you know what? You're both right. It means all of them. You Stein bring both of them, and they both have to be anything similar to these things have to be the Shman, and therefore Shini Shem and Shini Bailam are the Shman. This or the same to say differently, each one stands in its place and is included in our Klal Patikla. Okay. Or you can say, it's all started off. How do you know Zvika? We started by 2 dots, and we said we know Shechting and Zvika, and we want to know. We're coming back to Zvika. Maybe Rav Asher Nafka. We learned that from Rav Asher. Rav Asher said, okay, now we've done very well. We've learned that Shini Bailim has to be all kinds of karbonos. However, notice we only ended up with the Ayil Nazir, the Shlomim of the Nazir. After an Ayil Nazir, Shar Shlomim, how you know all kinds of Shlomim? There are many kinds. Time is named as Ayil Nazir. Learner from Ayil Nazir. Torah taught us Ayil Nazir. Why shouldn't that be for everything? I'll tell you why not. Mal Ayil Nazir, that's very particular and very sophisticated, and therefore very holy. The Nazir brings 3 korbanos with him. So therefore, so maybe we cannot learn from Ayil Nazir. The answer is yes, you could. You know why? Nichte Shlomo. Change it. You see Shlomo. The pasuk should have said there's Ayil. The second pasuk on the side. There's Ayil Yas Zevach Shlomim. It should say Shlomo his Shlomim, but it says Shlomim, all of them. My Shlomim, Rabbi's called Shlomim, all Shlomim. Okay, good. So we learned all Shlomim that needs to be the same. The only Ashton Shlomim. So we have Shlomim. Sharaf called Kachim. How do you know all other Kachim also? Learn all Shlomim, all Karbanos from Shlomim. No, my Shlomim is particular and it's unique. You have to lean on the animal. In the Sochem, you brought extra oil and wine. You picked up certain parts of the animal. That was so holy, it's so particular, it needs to be the Shemon. Maybe other Karbanos not. Tell you where. Hello, I'm across. It says in the Pasuk. We're listing various kinds. The Torah lists various kinds of Karbanos. The oil, the mincha, the chatas, the ashram, the miluim, the shlomim, various forms of karbonos. Occasionally, because of the shlomim, all compared to shlomim. My shlomim bein shini kodesh bein shini ba'al bein the shema. Just as the shlomim needs always the shema. Kol bein shini kodesh, whether change the label, the designation of the korban itself. Bein shini ba'al change the designation of the owner. Bein in the shema. Excellent. So now we've learned that karbonos need to be the shema, but we're missing one part that's a problem. Maybe completely puzzled. We learned in our Mishnah that we shechted it wrongly. It's not valid for the owner, but the owner is disenfranchised, but the korban still stays and has to be processed properly. Why? 1 second. Maybe learn from over here that it's a total fail and it gets ejected. How do you know that it still carries over its holiness? The pasuk says, as we learned earlier, you must keep the word as you made the neder. And the pasuk ends up. What will make me mind? Is it neder or is it nedova? Why are you saying nedova? Nedering. If you did it properly, if you made brought a neder and you brought a neder and you processed it as a neder, then continued as a neder. But if you messed up, then it loses its designation as a neder. It becomes a nedova. Not being nedova. One last kick at the can. However, why do we have both psukim? Why do the pasuk of Zayis Torah, Lo'ila, etc. and also Moitzes V'Sechel. It's Moitzes V'Sechel, it's V'Sechel, both. Because Rachmana Moitzes V'Sechel, if I had just told us the passage of Moitzes V'Sechel, I would turn the page and bring, do it as you said. I would say very good, but in what way should I be? What am I supposed to do? Keep my word in what particulars? I wouldn't know. Then because Rachmana Zoysa Torah to teach me that it has the proper designation of the no Shin Yishem, no Shem Kodesh. If we got someone just Zoysa Torah, have a minute Lipsula, they would become completely possible if I didn't do it properly. Because to teach me, one person teaches me that I have to be careful not to mislabel not the person and not the carbon, and the other person teaches me that if I did mislabel it, the validation for the owner is no longer valid for the owner, but the carbon continues on its path and still has to be maintained. As we said earlier, if somebody's going to eat the mistake on Yom Kippur morning, doesn't mean he's not going to fast the rest of Yom Kippur. If I have a carbon and I do a problem with it, I still have to continue. Some do get disqualified and rejected. But the general mislabel of owner usually is we continue and it stays as a plain, simple Nedava and gets processed and brought to Mizbeah. So, just to summarize, today we've sourced Shini Bailim, Shini Kodesh changing the name of the carbon, and Shini Bailim changing the owner of the carbon, and we ended up saying that even though if we changed it, it's no longer valid for the owner, but generally speaking, usually it still maintains its Kedusha. Thank you very much. For any questions, comments, or sponsorships, you can email me at dapinhand@gmail.com. Thank you. Goodbye.